Alright, so I'm going to pull you in here close and show you something real quick, okay? Alright, as you can see right here, I'm blowing through. It's not because the metal is too hot, it's actually because there's some rust on the inside. So what I'm going to end up probably doing is end up cutting and putting a patch in here. I mean, I got to do that up here too. Got to do that here and on the inside. Okay, I'm not sure if I caught it on the last video, so I'm trying this again. I'm still new at this recording. You'll probably figure that out from the shaky camera and everything else. Anyhow, what I wanted to show you here was, you see I got holes here. And it's not because I heated the metal up too much, it's because the metal is super thin. So I'm actually going to have to go back and probably cut out this section here and repatch it. As you can see, there's quite a bit of rust on the inside of this. So no big deal. Just, you know, it takes a little more time. But like I said before, I'm not in a hurry. Whatever I get done today, I get done today, and work on it again tomorrow. But I want to show you that. That's typically what happens when you start getting rust on the back of the metal. And like I said before, I should have probably cut this up higher. I didn't. Lesson learned. Next side, I'll double check it. So with a closer up shot, you can see these little BBs here. This is what is called splatter. It's just because of the flux core wire. You don't get that when you use gas wire. At least I didn't. It's a little bit more cleanup, but it's just as good of a weld as if you're using gas. I know some people out there, you know, they're hobbyists, really hobbyists, and by hobbyists I mean they don't do a lot of welding, and they just buy a welder, you know, a little Harbor Freight welder that does flux core. Okay, you can, as this shows you right here, you can use a flux core welder to do body work. You have to be a little more cautious, that's all. Okay, and you got more cleanup. It is what it is, you know. My first welder I bought was just a cheap little, well, it wasn't cheap at the time, but a cheap little flux core welder, and I did quite a bit of body work with it. Nothing fancy, nothing near as good as what I'm doing here. Okay, it was basically, I had a 79 Jeep Cherokee, and the whole rear quarter panels were rusted out, and you could actually climb up into the Jeep from those quarter panels. I did it once. Anyhow, I tried to pop rivet the metal in, it didn't work, so I ended up buying a little welder and just welded it in. Didn't care what it looked like. You know, Maryland, it's pretty cold up there in the wintertime, and my ultimate goal, my only goal, was to keep from freezing to death. So I accomplished that mission. I was pretty happy. So anyhow, let me get back to welding. Okay, so I had to go get a mask. Cheap little Harbor Freight one, you know. The fumes were actually starting to get to me, or the smoke from welding. So, but if you hear me cough, it's Unfortunately, it's you'll hear it a lot. I have a chronic cough because of the respiratory issues. Okay, so you see what happened here is my wire went through this little hole I was trying to fill, and it became long, and so I just kind of hit it sideways there and burned it off. Not worried about that, it'll come off either like I just knocked it off, or you just grind it off, no big deal. Like I said, my welds ain't pretty, but by the time I'm done, they will hold. All this is going to be ground smooth anyhow, or flush. You know, here's what it is. The end goal is to make sure that your seam is completely welded with no pinholes in it. If you got pinholes, you're going to get water and moisture in there eventually. Okay. You got a pinhole here, you get some moisture and water on it, it's going to start eating that out. It's going to continue and continue and continue, and that's what happens like with this here, is it probably started with a small spot and it gets bigger, and then as it gets bigger you get more stuff in there which makes it even bigger, and then it gets more, on and on and on. Now, one thing I want to point out too is, here in a few minutes I'll end up grinding this when I think I've got most of the seam welded. Once I clean it up, I'll be able to tell more of where I need to weld it. Okay, so once again, I don't know how well you can tell, but my wire kept going through the hole, or it wasn't, I'm gonna call it igniting when I touch the metal. When it doesn't do like, you're unable to get the spark going with flux core wire, it's because your area that you're welding there is dirty. In other words, it probably has slag on it. So, with flux core wire, I had to make sure the camera's still on. With flux core wire, what the flux does is it acts as a shielding gas, as if you were using a bottle of gas with regular wire that doesn't have the flux in it. It's pretty amazing, though, to think that they put flux in the middle of this little bitty wire. So anyhow, as I was saying, because I got a little bit off on my cut up here, I've got a little bit of hole. So what I'm trying to do is I'm just trying to real quickly build a ridge around this hole, and then I'll come back and start filling in off of that ridge until I get that hole filled in. You can do that with holes like this where I blew through it. I'm not going to do that. I have done it. It works. It's very tedious and takes a while. So I'd rather just zip that out and cut another piece and put it in there. But actually, in the long run, it's about the same amount of time. Oh, and for those who are getting more serious into the body work or welding or anything else, I use a grinder with a cutoff tool most of the time, but I also have a plasma cutter, and I tell you what, I love that plasma cutter. I couldn't cut a straight line free-handed if my life depended on it, but I just take a metal ruler and zip along it. But it's so much better, so much faster. And I want to say I've cut up to 1/4 inch with the one I got. I got the titanium 45 from Harbor Freight. And you'll notice as time goes on that I buy a lot of tools from Harbor Freight. I figure they're cheap enough, you know, that if they break, throw away, buy another one. And I take pretty good care of my tools, but I use my tools. So anyhow, back to welding. So as you can see, the dirtier your weld gets with flux core, the harder it is to strike an arc. But again, I'm not worried about how pretty it looks right now because I'm going to grind all this down. it just becomes annoying sometimes, you know, when you get in a rhythm and then you hit a dirty spot and it doesn't arc like it's supposed to, or when it's supposed to, and you end up feeding out 2 or 3 inches of wire or an inch or whatever. All right, one thing I want to point out is, and I'm not going to fast forward this video, but just take a look at how much time I'm spending just welding this, okay, just through here. Remember, the body shops go through pretty much the same thing. Okay, sure, they have some different techniques that they use. They're probably a lot better welder than I am, so that would make them a little faster. But when you take something to a body shop and they say, it's going to cost $2,500, okay, you're like, oh my God. Okay, well, you know, it is pretty expensive. I mean, for the average person, that's a lot of money, okay? But they spend a lot of time fixing it. One of the reasons that, and I'll keep mentioning this, one of the reasons I'm doing this channel is to show you that you can do your own. It's going to be very time consuming. It may not be perfect, but you can do it. I have the philosophy, if somebody else can do it, I can do it. I tell people God gave me the ability to learn anything I want to learn. And you know what? It's true.